In the next 2 hours, we will embark on a transformative journey through one of the most profound chapters of the Qur'an, discovering how ancient wisdom can bring peace to our modern hearts and minds. This is not just a study session, but a pathway to inner tranquility through the timeless guidance of Surah An-Nisa. Prepare to experience the Qur'an as both knowledge and healing for the soul. Welcome to our peaceful exploration of Surah An-Nisa, the Women, the 4th chapter of the Holy Qur'an. Before we begin, love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight? Share it in the comments below, and let's see how beautifully far and wide the words of the Qur'an travel. As we begin this sacred journey together, let us create a space of calm and reflection, where the ancient words can speak to our contemporary hearts with clarity and wisdom. The very act of seeking refuge in Allah from the whispers of doubt and negativity is itself a profound lesson in finding peace. When we say "A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytanir rajim," we are not merely reciting words but actively choosing to shield our hearts and minds from the chaos that surrounds us daily. In our fast-paced world, this simple act becomes a powerful tool for centering ourselves. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. These opening words are like a gentle embrace from the divine, reminding us that whatever guidance follows comes from a source of infinite compassion and understanding. The repetition of mercy in these divine names is deliberate, emphasizing that even when we encounter challenging teachings or difficult truths, they come wrapped in divine love. This opening formula appears at the beginning of every chapter of the Qur'an, except one, serving as a spiritual reset button. Each time we encounter it, we are invited to pause, breathe, and remember that we are about to receive guidance from the Creator of all things. It is both a protection and a preparation, clearing our hearts of preconceptions and opening our minds to divine wisdom. The beauty of beginning any study of the Qur'an with these words lies in their transformative power. They shift us from a state of ordinary consciousness to one of spiritual receptivity. When we truly internalize this opening, we move from being passive readers to active participants in a divine conversation that has been ongoing for over 14 centuries. Consider how different your day might be if you began each significant task by consciously seeking protection from negative influences and invoking divine mercy. This is not superstition, but a practical spirituality that acknowledges both our human vulnerability and our connection to something greater than ourselves. The Arabic word "A'udhu" implies not just seeking refuge but actively running towards safety, like a child running to the embrace of a loving parent. The phrase "min ash-shaytanir rajim" refers to being protected from the accursed Satan, but this encompasses more than just external evil. It includes protection from our own inner demons: doubt, fear, arrogance, hatred, and despair. When we seek this protection before studying sacred text, we are asking to be shielded from the voices within us that might prevent us from receiving guidance with humility and openness. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are both derived from the Arabic root that relates to the womb, suggesting a maternal, nurturing quality to divine mercy. This is significant because it means that whatever guidance we are about to receive comes not from a harsh judge seeking to punish, but from a loving parent seeking to guide their children toward what is best for them. This understanding should color our entire approach to studying religious text. The rhythm and flow of these Arabic phrases, when pronounced correctly, have their own meditative quality. The sounds themselves seem designed to slow down our breathing and calm our nervous system. This is not accidentalness. The Qur'an was revealed in a language where sound and meaning work together to create both intellectual understanding and emotional resonance. As we prepare to delve into Surah An-Nisa specifically, these opening invocations take on additional significance. This chapter deals with some of the most intimate and challenging aspects of human life: family relationships, marriage, inheritance, justice, and social responsibility. These are topics that can easily trigger our personal biases and emotional reactions. The opening protection and invocation of mercy serve as spiritual preparation for engaging with these sensitive subjects. The word surah itself means something enclosed by a fence or a chapter that encompasses. Each chapter of the Qur'an is like a complete world unto itself, with its own themes, rhythms, and spiritual atmosphere. Surah An-Nisa creates a particular spiritual environment focused on justice, compassion, and the protection of the vulnerable. When we approach this study with the proper spiritual preparation, we are not just learning about ancient laws or historical contexts. We are entering into a timeless conversation about what it means to live with dignity, treat others with justice, and create communities based on compassion rather than exploitation. The opening invocations ensure that we enter this conversation with the right heart and the right intentions. Ya ayyuha an-nasu ittaqu rabbakum, alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahidatin wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisa an wasta allaha alada tasa aluna bihi walahama inna allaha kana alaykum rakiban. O mankind, be conscious of your Lord who created you from a single soul, and created from it its mate and dispersed from both of them many men and women, and be conscious of Allah, through whom you ask one another, and the wombs. Indeed Allah is ever over you, an observer. These profound words establish the foundation upon which all of Surah An-Nisa rests. Before addressing any specific laws or guidance about relationships, inheritance, or social justice, the Quran reminds us of our fundamental unity as human beings. This is not merely a poetic introduction, but a revolutionary statement that challenges every form of discrimination and prejudice that has ever existed. The phrase min nafsin wahidatin, minhi, from a single soul, is one of the most powerful statements about human equality ever articulated. In a world where people are divided by race, nationality, social class, and countless other artificial barriers, the Quran declares that these divisions are ultimately illusory. At our deepest level, we share a common essence, a common origin, a common spiritual DNA that makes us all members of one human family. This teaching carries profound implications for how we view ourselves and others. When you encounter someone who seems completely different from you, someone of a different race, religion, culture, or social background, this verse reminds you that beneath all these surface differences lies the same fundamental human nature. The rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, the famous and the unknown one, all spring from the same spiritual source. The Arabic word nafs is often translated as soul, but it encompasses much more than our English understanding of that term. It refers to the complete human essence, or consciousness, our capacity for choice, our ability to love, our yearning for meaning and purpose. When the Quran says we all come from one nafs, it means we all share these fundamental human capacities and aspirations. The verse continues by mentioning the creation of humanity's mate, emphasizing the complementary nature of masculine and feminine. This is not about superiority or inferiority, but about the beautiful diversity that emerges from unity. From one soul comes the capacity for relationship, for love, for family, for community. The divine design includes both unity and diversity, teaching us that difference does not mean division. Wabatha, minhuma, rialan, katharan, wathe, nisa, and dispersed from both of them many men and women. The word batha suggests a scattering or spreading out, like seeds being planted across a vast field. Humanity was meant to spread across the earth, to form diverse cultures and societies, but always carrying within each person and each community the memory of our common origin. This dispersal is not accidental but purposeful. The diversity of human cultures, languages, and traditions reflects the infinite creativity of the divine. Each culture that has ever existed represents a unique experiment in what it means to be human, a different way of expressing our common humanity. This should inspire not competition or conflict, but curiosity and appreciation for the magnificent variety of human experience. The command wasta, Allah, be conscious of Allah, appears twice in this short passage, emphasizing its central importance. The Arabic word taqwa is often translated as fear, but it encompasses much more. It means being constantly aware of the divine presence, living with consciousness that our thoughts, words and actions matter in a cosmic sense. It is both reverence and responsibility, both awe and accountability. The phrase Aladi tasa aluna bilfi, minhu, through whom you ask one another, minhu, refers to the practice of invoking Allah's name when making requests or forming agreements. In traditional Arab culture, people would say, I ask you by Allah, when making an important request, recognizing that their human relationships existed within a larger divine context. This practice acknowledges that our relationships with each other are not merely social contracts but sacred trusts. Wal arhama, and the wombs, is a particularly beautiful and powerful phrase. The Arabic word arm is related to Raham, one of the divine names meaning the compassionate. The womb becomes a symbol of divine mercy, the place where new life is nurtured and protected. By mentioning wombs immediately after discussing human unity, the verse connects our common origin to the ongoing miracle of birth and family formation. This reference to wombs also serves as a bridge to the specific teachings about women and family life that will follow in the surah. It establishes that discussions about marriage, inheritance, and family relationships must always be grounded in recognition of the sacred nature of the family bond and the divine mercy that brings new life into the world. The verse concludes with Inna Allaha kana alaykum rakaban. Indeed, Allah is ever over you an observer. The word rakab suggests not a harsh surveillance but a loving watchfulness, like a parent keeping a protective eye on their children. This divine observation is both comforting and sobering. Wa atu al yatama, in walaham wala tatabadalu al-kabetha bil tayyibi, wala takulu amwalaham ila amwalikum innahu kana huban. And give to the orphans their properties, and do not substitute the defective for the good, and do not consume their properties into your own. Indeed, that is ever a great sin. With these words, the Qur'an presents humanity with its first concrete moral test. After establishing our common origin and shared humanity, we are immediately confronted with a challenge that reveals the true nature of our character. How do we treat those who cannot protect themselves? The way a society treats its orphans becomes a mirror reflecting its deepest values and priorities. The orphan represents the ultimate test of human compassion because orphans possess no power, no influence, no ability to reciprocate favors or seek revenge for wrongs done to them. When we help an orphan, we do so purely for the sake of goodness itself, without expectation of worldly return. This makes the treatment of orphans perhaps the most accurate measure of genuine righteousness versus mere social performance. In the Arabian society where these words were first revealed, orphans were particularly vulnerable. In a tribal culture where protection came through family connections, a child without parents was essentially defenseless. Unscrupulous guardians could easily exploit orphans, stealing their inheritance while appearing to care for them. The Qur'an's intervention on behalf of orphans was revolutionary, establishing divine protection for those who had no earthly protectors. The command wa atu al yatama amwalaham, give to the orphans their properties, seems simple, but it establishes a profound principle. The orphan's inheritance belongs to them, not to their guardians. This might seem obvious to us today, but in a world where might often made right, explicitly protecting the property rights of the powerless was groundbreaking. The verse recognizes orphans as individuals with inherent rights, not as objects of charity whose fate depends entirely on the whims of others. The prohibition against substituting al-kabetha bil tayyibi, the defective for the good reveals a deeper principle about integrity in our dealings with the vulnerable. It was apparently common for dishonest guardians to keep the valuable items from an orphan's inheritance for themselves while giving the orphan inferior replacements. A guardian might keep fine livestock while giving the orphan sick animals, or keep fertile land while giving the orphan barren plots. This practice represents a particularly insidious form of theft because it maintains the appearance of fulfilling one's duty while actually perpetrating fraud. The orphan receives something, so technically they have not been left with nothing, but they have been cheated of what rightfully belongs to them. This kind of deception is especially harmful because it corrupts not only the guardian's character but also potentially confuses the orphan about their true worth and inheritance. The phrase wala takulu amwalahum ila amwalikum, do not consume their properties into your own, uses the verb akala, which literally means to eat. This powerful metaphor suggests that taking orphans' wealth is like devouring it, consuming it completely so that nothing remains. The imagery evokes a predator consuming its prey, emphasizing the savage nature of exploiting those who cannot defend themselves. The word ila can mean into or with, suggesting different ways this consumption might occur. A guardian might directly steal orphans' money, or might gradually mix the orphan's assets with their own until the distinction disappears. Both practices represent violations of the sacred trust placed in those who care for orphans. The verse concludes with the stark warning, "Innahu kana huban kibiran." Indeed, that is ever a great sin. The word ahab represents one of the strongest terms for sin in Arabic, suggesting something that incurs divine punishment. By describing the exploitation of orphans as a great sin, the Qur'an establishes that crimes against the vulnerable are among the most serious moral failures a person can commit. This teaching reveals something profound about the divine perspective on justice. In human societies, crimes against the powerful often receive more attention and harsher punishment than crimes against the weak. A theft from a wealthy person might be prosecuted vigorously, while the exploitation of an orphan might be overlooked or minimized. The Quran reverses this hierarchy, declaring that the vulnerability of the victim makes the crime more serious, not less so. The placement of this teaching immediately after the establishment of human unity is significant. Having been reminded that all people share a common origin and inherent dignity, we are then tested on whether we truly believe this principle. If we genuinely see all humans as members of one family, then exploiting orphans becomes not just theft but a betrayal of our own siblings. The orphan's vulnerability becomes not an opportunity for exploitation but a call to demonstrate the protective love that should characterize human relationships. This verse also introduces a theme that will recur throughout Surah An-Nisa, the principle that true power lies not in the ability to dominate others but in the choice to protect and uplift them. The guardian who faithfully protects an orphan's rights demonstrates real strength, while the guardian who exploits that vulnerability reveals profound weakness of character. Inna aladina yakulun amwala aliyatama zulman, inama yakulun fibotunihim naran wasayaslona sairan. Indeed, those who devour the property of orphans unjustly are only consuming into their bellies fire, and they will be burned in a blazing fire. The gentle guidance of the previous verse now gives way to one of the most vivid and terrifying warnings in the entire Quran. The image presented here is so stark and powerful that it has haunted the consciences of believers for over 14 centuries. This is not merely a legal prohibition, but a glimpse into the spiritual reality that lies beneath our material actions. The verb yakulun appears again, but now its metaphorical power becomes fully unleashed. The word choice is deliberate and devastating. When someone steals an orphan's inheritance, they might think they are simply taking money or property, but the Quran reveals the true nature of their action. They are consuming fire itself. Every bite of food purchased with stolen orphan money Every moment of pleasure bought with their suffering becomes a mouthful of divine punishment. This imagery speaks to a profound spiritual truth about the nature of ill-gotten gains. We might imagine that wealth obtained through exploitation simply becomes part of our normal possessions, indistinguishable from anything else we own. But the Qur'an teaches that stolen wealth retains its spiritual character forever. It carries within it the pain of the victim and the anger of divine justice. What appears to be nourishing is actually poisonous. What seems to provide comfort actually burns from within. The phrase "nihim" into their bellies emphasizes the intimate internal nature of this punishment. This is not something that will happen to them externally, but something that occurs within their very being. The fire becomes part of them, integrated into their essence through the act of consumption. Just as food becomes absorbed into our bodies and affects our health and energy, so too does the spiritual poison of exploitation become absorbed into the soul of the exploiter. Consider the psychological reality behind this spiritual metaphor. Those who exploit orphans must live with the knowledge of what they have done. They must face the eyes of the children they have cheated, knowing that they have stolen not just money but future opportunities, security, and hope. This guilt and shame create a kind of internal burning that no external wealth can extinguish. The more they consume of what they have stolen, the more they feed the fire of their own conscience.
The word zulman, suru unjustly, or wrongfully, suru adds another layer of meaning. The root CLM relates to darkness and oppression, suggesting that exploiting orphans creates a spiritual darkness within the perpetrator. They move away from the light of divine guidance into the shadows of selfishness and cruelty. This darkness then manifests as the fire that burns within them. The progression from inama yakuluna fi bujunihim naran, they are only consuming fire into their bellies, to wasayas lorna sayaran, and they will be burned in a blazing fire, reveals the expansion of this punishment. What begins as an internal burning eventually becomes an external reality. The fire that starts in their bellies eventually consumes their entire being. This suggests that spiritual corruption, if left unchecked, inevitably spreads until it affects every aspect of a person's existence. The word saya refers to an intensely blazing fire, one that burns with tremendous heat and light. This is not a gentle flame but a raging inferno. The choice of this particular word emphasizes that the punishment for exploiting orphans is not merely unpleasant but truly terrible. The intensity of the punishment reflects the severity of the crime, not because God is cruel, but because the violation of the vulnerable strikes at the very heart of divine justice. This verse also reveals something important about divine timing. The internal fire begins immediately, when someone consumes orphan property unjustly, but the full blazing punishment is described with sayas lorna, they will be burned, suggesting a future culmination. This teaches us that divine justice operates on multiple timescales. There are immediate spiritual consequences for our actions felt in our consciences and our souls, but there is also an ultimate accounting where all injustices are finally balanced. The parallel structure of the verse Iya Kaluna, Yakaluna, and Naran, Sayaran, creates a rhythmic emphasis that makes the warning impossible to ignore. The repetition hammers home the message that this is not a minor transgression, but a fundamental violation of divine law. The rhyme between Naran fire and Sayaran blazing fire creates an auditory connection that reinforces the thematic connection between present and future punishment. Perhaps most importantly, this verse establishes that there are some actions so fundamentally wrong that they carry within themselves their own punishment. The exploiter of orphans doesn't need to wait for some external judgment. The very act of exploitation begins burning them from within. This teaches us that moral laws are not arbitrary rules imposed from outside, but descriptions of spiritual realities built into the fabric of existence itself.
Wa in kiftam ala tuksi shu fil yatama fanki hu martaba lakum min An-Nisa mathna wa thulatha wa ruba fa in kiftam ala tadalu fa wahidatan al mamalakata manukum dalika adan wala taulu. And if you fear that you will not be just concerning the orphans, then marry those that please you of women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one or those your right hands possess. That is more suitable, that you may not incline to injustice. This verse presents one of the most profound connections in the Qur'an, linking the protection of orphans directly to the regulation of marriage. At first glance, this connection might seem puzzling. What does marrying multiple wives have to do with caring for orphans? But deeper reflection reveals a sophisticated understanding of how social institutions can either protect or exploit the vulnerable. The phrase wa in kiftam ala tuksi shu fil yatama, if you fear that you will not be just concerning the orphans, creates a direct conditional relationship between orphan care and marriage choices. This suggests that the same moral character required to protect orphans is necessary for just treatment in marriage. If a man cannot be trusted to handle an orphan's inheritance fairly, how can he be trusted to treat multiple wives with justice? The historical context illuminates this connection further. In pre-Islamic Arabian society, wealthy men would often become guardians of orphan girls specifically to gain control of their inheritance. They would then marry these orphan girls, not out of love or genuine care, but to legally access their wealth. Alternatively, they might refuse to marry the orphan girls under their care, preventing them from marrying others while keeping control of their property indefinitely. The Qur'an's solution is characteristically elegant and protective. If you fear you cannot be just with the orphan girls in your care, if you recognize that your financial interest in their inheritance might corrupt your guardianship, then you should marry other women instead. This removes the conflict of interest and ensures that your decisions about the orphan's welfare are made purely for her benefit, not for your financial gain. The permission for polygamy in this verse is thus not a general encouragement of multiple marriages, but a specific solution to a particular problem of orphan exploitation. The verse essentially says, if your desire for multiple wives might lead you to exploit orphans for their wealth, then satisfy that desire through marriage to other women who are not under your guardianship. The phrase ma taba lakum min An-Nisa, those that please you of women, acknowledges the legitimate human desire for companionship and affection in marriage. The Qur'an does not demand that marriage be purely utilitarian or loveless. The word taba suggests both attraction and suitability, recognizing that successful marriages require both emotional connection and practical compatibility. The famous numerical permission mathna wa thulatha wa ruba, 2 or 3 or 4, has been the subject of extensive scholarly discussion. These numbers are presented not as a progression or recommendation, but as maximum limits. The verse is not saying marry 4 wives, but rather marry no more than 4 wives. In a society where men regularly married dozens of women, limiting marriage to 4 wives was actually a significant restriction. The crucial condition fa in kiftam ala tadalu fa wahidatan,
but if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one,
places an enormous responsibility on any man considering multiple marriages. He must honestly assess his own character and capabilities. Can he truly provide equal emotional support, physical care, financial provision, and time to multiple wives? The Qur'an demands brutal self-honesty in this assessment. The word tadalu comes from the root meaning justice and balance. This is not merely about providing equal material goods, but about maintaining emotional and spiritual equity among wives. Can a man love multiple women equally? Can he give them equal attention, equal respect, equal consideration in all decisions? The psychological and emotional demands of truly just polygamy are so enormous that many scholars argue the verse is actually guiding toward monogamy. The phrase Olma malakat aymanukum, or those your right hands possess nice, refers to female slaves or captives, a reality, but the historical context that cannot be ignored. However, even here the emphasis remains on justice and proper treatment. The Qur'an consistently pushes toward the liberation and dignified treatment of slaves, and this reference should be understood within that broader ethical framework. The verse concludes with Tadika anola tadalu, that is more suitable that you may not incline to injustice. The word tadalu suggests both financial hardship and moral deviation. By limiting marriages to what a man can truly handle justly, the Quran protects not only the potential wives but also the man himself from falling into patterns of neglect, favoritism, or exploitation. This entire teaching demonstrates the Quran's sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. It recognizes that good intentions are not enough. Social institutions must be structured to support moral behavior rather than tempt people toward corruption. The regulation of marriage serves not to restrict human happiness, but to ensure that the pursuit of personal fulfillment does not come at the expense of justice and human dignity. Surah An-Nisa asadukatidumna nalatan fa intibn lakum shayan minhumna sanfa kuluhu haniyan mariyan, and give the women their due dowries graciously, but if they give up willingly to you anything of it, then take it in satisfaction and ease. This verse introduces a revolutionary concept that fundamentally transformed the status of women in society. The word sadukat refers to the dower or man, the mandatory gift that a husband must give to his wife upon marriage. But the deeper significance lies in how this verse frames women's economic rights and personal autonomy in ways that were unprecedented in the ancient world. The command wahitu,
and give, places an absolute obligation on the husband.
This is not a suggestion or a cultural custom that might be followed or ignored based on convenience. It is a divine command that makes the payment of dower a fundamental requirement for the validity of the marriage contract itself. Without this payment, the marriage lacks one of its essential components according to Islamic law.
The phrase sadakwatiyinna, their due dowries, uses a possessive form that emphasizes ownership. The dower belongs to the woman, not to her family, not to her husband after the marriage, but to her personally. This established women as independent economic entities with property rights that could not be violated by male relatives or husbands. In a world where women were often treated as property themselves, this recognition of their right to own property was revolutionary. The word nilatan is particularly beautiful and significant. It comes from a root meaning to give freely and graciously, suggesting that the dower should be given with joy and generosity, not grudgingly or as a burdensome obligation. The husband should view the dower not as a price he pays to acquire a wife, but as a gift he joyfully presents to the woman who will share his life. This transforms the entire emotional context of the transaction from commercial to romantic. The concept of nila also implies that the dower is given without expectation of return or reciprocal benefit. Unlike a business transaction where both parties expect to receive equivalent value, the dower is a unilateral gift that acknowledges the woman's inherent worth and dignity. The husband gives it not because he expects something in return, but because honoring the woman he marries is itself a joy and privilege. The conditional clause fayin tibna lakuman shayin minhu nafsan, but if they give up willingly to you anything of it, introduces an important principle of female autonomy. The woman has the right to voluntarily return part or all of her dower to her husband if she chooses, but this choice must be entirely her own. The word tibna emphasizes that this must be a genuine expression of her own will, not the result of pressure, manipulation, or coercion. The phrase in shayin minhu milas,
Anything of it indicates that the woman's autonomy extends to any portion of her dower, whether large or small. She might choose to contribute her dower toward household expenses, use it to help her husband's business, or gift it back to him as an expression of love. The important principle is that this remains her choice to make. The word nafsan is particularly significant. It means soul or self, indicating that the woman's decision must come from her deepest, most authentic self, not from external pressure or social expectations. This requirement protects women from family members or husbands who might try to pressure them into giving up their rights. The Qur'an recognizes that true consent can only come from the heart, not from social coercion. The conclusion Fakuluhu Hanan Marian Milas, then take it in satisfaction and ease, gives the husband permission to accept his wife's gift, but only under the strict conditions previously established. The word Hanan suggests something pleasant and wholesome, while Marian implies something that goes down easily and causes no harm. Together, these words suggest that the husband can accept his wife's generosity with a clear conscience, knowing that it comes from her genuine desire to give. This phrase also contains a subtle warning. The husband should only accept his wife's gift if he can do so Hanan Marian. If accepting her gift would create financial hardship for her, or if it comes from pressure rather than genuine desire, then it would not be wholesome and should not be accepted. The husband bears responsibility for ensuring that his acceptance of his wife's generosity does not harm her interests. The entire verse establishes women as autonomous economic actors with rights that must be respected and choices that must be honored. It rejects both the notion that women are property to be bought and sold, and the idea that women are children who cannot make their own financial decisions. Instead, it presents a model where women enter marriage as equal partners with their own resources and their own agency. This teaching also reveals the Qur'an's sophisticated understanding of healthy marital dynamics. By requiring the husband to give generously while protecting the wife's right to give voluntarily, the verse creates a framework for mutual generosity based on love rather than obligation. This foundation of voluntary giving and receiving helps establish the trust and respect that successful marriages require. Wala tutu as sufaha and walakumu. Alati jala alatu lakum kiman mozakum feha waksuhum wakulahan kolan marufa. And do not give the weak-minded your property which Allah has made a means of sustenance for you, but provide for them with it and clothe them, and speak to them words of appropriate kindness. This verse introduces one of the most sophisticated concepts in financial ethics, milas, the recognition that wealth carries responsibilities not only to oneself but to the broader community, particularly to those who lack the capacity to manage resources wisely. The teaching here goes far beyond simple charity, establishing principles of financial guardianship that protect both individual assets and vulnerable people. The term as sufaha is often translated as the weak-minded or foolish, but its meaning encompasses a broader category of people who for various reasons cannot handle financial responsibilities effectively. This might include children who lack maturity, adults with cognitive disabilities, people struggling with addiction, or those whose emotional instability makes them prone to financial disasters. The Quran acknowledges that not everyone possesses the same capacity for financial judgment, and this recognition forms the basis for protective measures. The phrase Mwalakumu, Alati Jala Alatu Lakum Kiman, your property, which Allah has made a means of sustenance for you, contains a profound theological insight about the nature of wealth. The word kiman comes from a root meaning to stand or to support, suggesting that wealth serves as the foundation that allows families and communities to remain upright and stable. This framing transforms our understanding of personal property from mere individual possession to a trust that supports not only ourselves but those dependent on us. This perspective revolutionizes how we think about financial responsibility. Your money is not truly yours in the absolute sense. It is a trust from Allah that you must manage wisely for the benefit of yourself and others. This creates a sacred obligation to preserve and grow this wealth responsibly, not for selfish purposes but because so many lives depend on its wise management. The prohibition wala tutu, not give, might seem harsh, but it reflects a deep wisdom about the nature of true compassion. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is to refuse their requests, especially when granting those requests would ultimately harm them. A parent who gives unlimited money to a drug-addicted child is not showing love but enabling destruction. A guardian who allows a mentally unstable person to squander their inheritance is not respecting their autonomy but abandoning their duty of care. The alternative approach, warzukum fiha waksuhum. Instead of handing over cash that might be misused, the guardian should use the resources to directly provide what the person actually needs: food, clothing, housing, medical care, education, and other genuine necessities. This principle of indirect provision requires wisdom and discernment. The guardian must learn to distinguish between genuine needs and destructive wants, between providing support and enabling dependency. This is not about controlling others or treating them as children, but about channeling resources toward outcomes that truly benefit the vulnerable person's long-term welfare. The word fiha, minus, with it mias, is significant because it indicates that the provision should come from the vulnerable person's own resources when possible, not from the guardian's personal wealth. This preserves the dignity of the vulnerable person by ensuring they are not reduced to objects of charity, but rather individuals whose own resources are being managed for their benefit. When a guardian uses an orphan's inheritance to buy the orphan food and clothing, the orphan maintains ownership of their wealth even while being protected from mismanaging it. The command waqul lahum qawlan marufan, and speak to them words of appropriate kindness, minus, addresses the emotional and psychological aspects of financial guardianship. People who have their financial autonomy restricted often feel frustrated, angry, or humiliated. The guardian has a responsibility to communicate decisions with kindness, respect, and clear explanation. The phrase qawlan marufan literally means recognized speech, or speech that is known to be good. This suggests communication that follows established patterns of respectful, caring dialogue. The guardian should explain their decisions, listen to concerns, and maintain the vulnerable person's dignity even while limiting their financial access. This is not about talking down to people or treating them as intellectually inferior, but about communicating care and protection in ways that preserve relationship and respect. This verse also establishes an important principle about the purpose of wealth accumulation. Money should be preserved not for its own sake, but because it serves as the foundation for caring for others. The wealthy person who hoards resources while family members or dependents suffer has misunderstood the fundamental purpose of financial blessing. Wealth exists to create stability and opportunity, not just for the wealth holder, but for all those within their circle of responsibility. The teaching here balances individual rights with community needs, personal autonomy with protective intervention, and financial wisdom with compassionate care. It recognizes that true freedom sometimes requires temporary limitations, and that genuine love sometimes demands difficult decisions that prioritize long-term welfare over immediate desires. Yusikumu Allahum fibuladikum lildakari, mithlu hazi al-unthayen fa'in kuna nisa an-forka, ithnatain falahum mathuluthani mathareka, wa kanat wahum mada, falaha nisfu waliya bawehi, likuli wahum numa, as sudusu mima, tareka, in kana lahum maladun. Allah instructs you concerning your children, for the male, what is equal to the share of 2 females. But if they are only daughters, 2 or more, for them is 2/3 of what he left. And if there is only one, for her is half. And for one's parents, to each one of them is 1/6 of what he left if he had a child. This verse introduces what may be the most mathematically precise legal system ever revealed in religious scripture. The Islamic inheritance laws represent a revolutionary approach to wealth distribution that balances family stability with individual justice, ensuring that wealth serves multiple generations rather than being concentrated in the hands of a single heir. The opening phrase Yusikamu Allahum fi aladikum, Minbus Allahumma, instructs you concerning your children, in Dibil, establishes that these are not mere human conventions or cultural preferences, but divine commandments that reflect cosmic principles of justice. The use of the verb yusi, instructs rather than yeshuru, advises or yandubu, recommends indicates that these laws are binding obligations, not optional guidelines. The principle lil dakari mithlu hazi al unfayin, for the male, what is equal to the share of 2 females, has generated extensive discussion throughout Islamic history. Understanding this ratio requires grasping the broader economic framework within which it operates. In the traditional Islamic system, males bear complete financial responsibility for supporting their female relatives, wives, daughters, sisters and mothers. A woman's inheritance is essentially her personal wealth, while a man's inheritance becomes a family resource supporting multiple people. When viewed within this context, the 2:1 ratio actually creates economic equality rather than inequality. If a brother receives twice his sister's inheritance but must use his share to support his wife and children, while his sister keeps her inheritance as personal savings, both siblings end up with roughly equivalent economic security. The apparent mathematical inequality masks a deeper functional equality that accounts for different social responsibilities. The phrase Surah An-Nisa and Forka, but if they are only daughters, 2 or more, Mr. addresses the situation where a deceased person leaves only female children. The specification, Forka, above 2 means 2 or more daughters, and they collectively receive thuluthani mathareka, mis 2/3 of what he left. This ensures that daughters are not disadvantaged when there are no sons to inherit the traditionally larger male portions. The case in kanat wa humma, ithnan, and if there is only one, for her is half, demonstrates the system's flexibility and protection for individual daughters. A sole daughter receives half the estate rather than 2/3, with the remaining portion distributed among other relatives according to specific rules. This prevents excessive concentration of wealth while ensuring the daughter receives substantial provision. The parental inheritance while layabaway hilaikuli wahideen min huma, as sudusu, and for one's parents to each one of them is 1/6. Establishes one of the most beautiful principles in inheritance law. Children have an obligation to provide for their parents even after death. This creates an intergenerational flow of resources that honors the parents who sacrificed for their children's upbringing and ensures elderly parents maintain dignity and security. The conditional in kana lahu waladun, if he had a child, indicates that parental inheritance varies depending on whether the deceased leaves children. When there are children, parents receive fixed 1/6. When there are no children, parents receive larger portions as primary heirs. This mathematical precision ensures that inheritance adapts to family circumstances while maintaining consistent principles of justice. These inheritance laws serve multiple profound purposes beyond mere wealth distribution. First, they prevent the concentration of wealth in single families across generations as estates are systematically divided among multiple heirs. This creates a natural mechanism for wealth circulation throughout society, preventing the emergence of permanent aristocratic classes based purely on inherited wealth. Second, the laws strengthen family bonds by creating financial interdependence across generations and between siblings. When everyone in a family has inheritance rights, family members have practical incentives to maintain relationships and support each other. The system encourages family unity while protecting individual rights. Third, the mathematical precision of the laws eliminates much of the conflict and litigation that typically surrounds inheritance disputes. When shares are clearly defined by divine law rather than left to human discretion, families spend less time fighting over distributions and more time grieving and healing together. The inheritance system also demonstrates remarkable sophistication in addressing complex family structures. The Qur'an provides detailed guidance for situations involving multiple wives, half-siblings, adopted children, and various combinations of surviving relatives. This comprehensive approach ensures that justice is maintained regardless of family complexity. Perhaps most importantly, these laws reflect a profound understanding of wealth's social function, rather than treating inheritance as absolute private property that owners can distribute according to personal whims. The Quran establishes inheritance as a social institution that must serve both individual needs and community stability. Wa, in kiftum shikaka bainihima, fabathu, hakaman, min ahlihi wa hakaman, min alihiya in yurida, islahan, yuwafiki, aliya, bainahuma, inna, ilahakana, aliman, kabiran. If you fear a breach between them twain, appoint arbiters, one from his family and the other from hers. If they wish for peace, Allah will cause their reconciliation. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and acquainted with all things. This verse presents one of the most sophisticated approaches to conflict resolution ever articulated, establishing a framework for addressing marital discord that balances justice with healing, individual rights with family harmony, and practical intervention with spiritual guidance. The wisdom contained here extends far beyond marriage counseling to encompass fundamental principles of human mediation and reconciliation. The phrase wa, in kiftum shikaka bainihima, min, if you fear a breach between them, min, acknowledges a crucial reality about human relationships. Even the most loving partnerships can encounter serious difficulties that threaten their survival. The word shika comes from a root meaning to split or to crack, suggesting a deep fracture in the relationship that goes beyond minor disagreements or temporary tensions. This is not about everyday marital friction, but about fundamental breakdowns that endanger the marriage itself. The use of kiftum mun, you fear, indicates that intervention should occur when there are clear warning signs of serious trouble, not necessarily after irreparable damage has occurred. This proactive approach recognizes that early intervention is more likely to succeed than waiting until the relationship has completely deteriorated. The community bears responsibility for recognizing these warning signs and responding appropriately rather than ignoring marital problems until they explode into public scandals or violence. The solution fabathu, hakaman, min alihi wa hakaman, min ahlihi, appoint arbiters, one from his family and the other from hers, demonstrates remarkable wisdom about the psychology of conflict resolution. By requiring arbiters from both families, the system ensures that each spouse has an advocate who understands their perspective and background. This prevents either party from feeling ganged up on or unfairly treated by the mediation process. The word hakam refers to someone with both wisdom and authority, not merely a neutral facilitator but an active decision maker who can propose solutions and, if necessary, make binding judgments. The choice of family members as arbiters rather than strangers reflects understanding that effective mediation requires deep knowledge of the individuals involved, their histories, their personalities, and their family dynamics. The requirement for arbiters from both families also creates a natural system of checks and balances. Neither family can simply impose their will on the other, and both sides must work together to find solutions that satisfy everyone involved. This collaborative approach often leads to more creative and sustainable solutions than adversarial processes where one side wins and the other loses. The conditional phrase in Yurida, Islahan, if they wish for peace, min, contains perhaps the most profound insight in the entire verse. The word Isla means more than just reconciliation. It implies active reform, improvement and healing. The arbiters cannot force peace on unwilling parties. True reconciliation requires genuine desire from both spouses to rebuild their relationship on healthier foundations. This principle recognizes that external intervention, no matter how skilled or well-intentioned, cannot save a marriage unless both partners are committed to the hard work of change and growth. The arbiters can provide guidance, suggest solutions, and facilitate communication, but the fundamental choice to prioritize the marriage over individual grievances must come from the couples themselves. The promise yuwafiki Allahu bainahuma, Nala will cause their reconciliation, introduces the spiritual dimension of conflict resolution. When human beings make sincere efforts toward peace and healing, divine assistance becomes available to help them succeed. This is not magical thinking, but recognition that relationships involve more than just practical negotiations. They require transformation of hearts and spirits that often exceeds purely human capabilities. The divine assistance mentioned here might manifest in various ways: increased patience and empathy between the spouses, insights into solutions that hadn't occurred to them before, healing of old emotional wounds, or simply the strength to forgive and begin again. The key is that this assistance comes in response to genuine human effort, not as a substitute for it. The verse concludes with Inna Allah kana alaman kabiran. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and acquainted with all things. The word alaman refers to comprehensive knowledge, while kabirad suggests intimate, experiential knowledge gained through close observation. Together, these attributes assure us that divine guidance for human relationships comes from complete understanding of human nature, needs and possibilities. This assurance is particularly important in the context of marital counseling, where couples often feel that no one understands their unique situation or the complexity of their problems. The verse reminds us that while human arbiters may have limited perspective, the divine source of this guidance has complete knowledge of all the factors involved in human relationships. The entire framework established by this verse represents a middle path between two extremes: the casual dissolution of marriage at the first sign of difficulty, and the forced continuation of relationships that have become harmful or destructive. It provides a structured process for attempting reconciliation while acknowledging that not all marriages can or should be saved. Haramat alaykum ummahatukum wa banatukum wa akhawatukum wa bana alaki 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 wa ummahatu nisaikum wa alati dakaltum bihinna. Prohibited to you are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your father's sisters, your mother's sisters, your brother's daughters, your sister's daughters, your mothers who nursed you, your sisters through nursing, your wives' mothers, your stepdaughters who are under your care from your wives with whom you have consummated the marriage. This verse establishes one of the most comprehensive and sophisticated systems of marriage prohibitions ever articulated, creating boundaries that protect the fundamental structures of human society while preserving the sanctity of family relationships. These laws represent far more than arbitrary restrictions. They reflect deep wisdom about human psychology, social stability, and the preservation of trust within families. The opening declaration, Haramat alaykum, prohibited to you, uses the strongest possible language of religious prohibition. This is not advice or cultural preference but absolute divine law that admits no exceptions or modifications. The verb form indicates that these prohibitions are permanently established and universally applicable, regardless of time, place, or cultural circumstances. The first category, Ummahatukum wa banatukum wa akhawatukum, your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, establishes the core nuclear family as a zone of absolute protection. These relationships form the foundation of human trust and security. A child must be able to trust completely in parental protection, and parents must be able to care for their children without any suspicion of exploitation. Similarly, siblings must be able to maintain lifelong bonds of mutual support and affection. The prohibition against marrying one's mother or daughter might seem so obvious as to be unnecessary, but its explicit statement serves important purposes. It establishes that these boundaries are not merely cultural taboos but divine laws, and it provides the foundation for extending similar protections to more complex relationships. Moreover, in societies where powerful men might attempt to justify any behavior through force or wealth, these explicit prohibitions create moral boundaries that cannot be crossed regardless of power or position. The extended family prohibitions Ummahatukum wa alatukum wa bana alaki wa bana alaki wa bana alaki, your father's sisters, your mother's sisters, your brother's daughters, your sister's daughters, recognize that family trust extends beyond the immediate nuclear family. Aunts and uncles often serve as secondary parents, particularly in times of crisis or loss. Nieces often receive special affection and protection from their aunts and uncles. These relationships must remain pure and trustworthy. The remarkable inclusion of wa ummahatukum wa alati or alatukum wa akhawatukum wa alatukum wa akhawatukum wa, your mothers who nursed you, your sisters through nursing, demonstrates the Qur'an's profound understanding that family bonds are not merely biological but emotional and relational. A woman who nurses a child creates a bond as sacred and protective as biological motherhood. This recognition elevates the status of nursing mothers and acknowledges that love and care, not just genetics, create family relationships. The nursing relationship rather was particularly important in Arabian society, where wet nurses were common and often developed lifelong bonds with the children they nursed. By extending marriage prohibitions to these relationships, the Qur'an ensures that these bonds remain pure and protective. The child who was nursed by a woman other than his biological mother must be able to trust in her maternal care throughout life, just as biological children trust their mothers. The in-law prohibitions wa ummahatukum wa alatukum wa, your wives' mothers, establish that marriage creates extended family relationships that must be respected and protected. When a man marries a woman, her mother becomes like his own mother in terms of the respect and appropriate distance required. This prevents the exploitation of vulnerable older women and ensures that mothers-in-law can trust their sons-in-law to maintain appropriate boundaries. The step relationship prohibition wa rabaibakum olati fi hujurakum min nisaikum olati dakaltum bihinna, your stepdaughters who are under your care from your wives with whom you have consummated the marriage, addresses one of the most psychologically complex situations in family life. When a man marries a woman who has daughters from a previous marriage, those daughters must be able to trust him as a father figure, not fear him as a potential predator. The phrase alati fi hujurakum, who are under your care, emphasizes the protective nature of the stepfather relationship. The word hijra refers to the lap or protective embrace, suggesting that stepdaughters should find safety and security in their stepfather's home, not danger or exploitation. This protection extends particularly to min nisaikum olati dakaltum bihinna, from your wives with whom you have consummated the marriage, indicating that the prohibition takes effect once the marriage becomes a full family unit. These boundaries serve multiple crucial functions in preserving healthy society. They protect children from sexual exploitation by the very people who should be their protectors. They preserve the trust necessary for extended families to function as support networks. They prevent the confusion and psychological damage that would result from mixing sexual and familial relationships. Wabudu Allaha wala tushrik bihi shay'an. Wabul waladay, niyisanan, wabudu, yel korba, waliyatama wal masakini waljari, dl korba, waljari al junubi, wazahibi biljanbi wabni az sabili wal mamalakate monakamina, Allaha la yuhibu man kana muktalan fahuran. Worship Allah, and associate nothing with Him, and to parents do good, and to relatives and orphans and the needy and the near neighbor, and the neighbor farther away, and the companion at your side and the traveler and those whom your right hands possess. Indeed, Allah does not like those who are self-deluding and boastful. This verse presents one of the most comprehensive blueprints for building a just and compassionate society ever articulated. Beginning with humanity's relationship to the divine, it systematically expands outward through every circle of human connection, creating a complete social framework based on worship, justice, and care for others. The structure itself teaches us that true spiritual life cannot be separated from social responsibility. The command Wabudu Allaha wala tushrik bihi shay'an, worship Allah, and associate nothing with Him, establishes the theological foundation upon which all social ethics must rest. The word ibadah encompasses much more than ritual worship. It means to serve, honor, and submit to Allah in every aspect of life. This worship becomes the source of both humility and strength that enables us to serve others effectively. The prohibition against shirk disassociating partners with Allah, His profound social implications beyond its theological meaning. When we make anything other than Allah our ultimate concern mine, whether money, power, nationality, or even family, we corrupt our ability to treat all people with equal dignity. True monotheism liberates us from the worship of finite things and enables us to see all human beings as equally precious in divine sight. The progression begins with Wabul waladay niyisanan, and to parents do good. The word ihsan represents the highest level of excellence and beauty in action, going far beyond mere duty or obligation. Children must not simply obey their parents or avoid harming them, but actively seek to bring beauty, excellence, and joy into their parents' lives. This recognition of parental sacrifice and dignity forms the foundation for all other social relationships. The command extends to Wabudu, al-Korba, and to relatives, Bishan, acknowledging that family bonds create special obligations and opportunities for service. The extended family serves as the first circle of social support beyond the nuclear family, providing security and assistance during times of need. Strong family networks reduce the burden on community resources while ensuring that no one faces life's challenges entirely alone. The mention of waliyatama wal masakini medicine and the needy returns to themes that have appeared throughout the surah, emphasizing that care for the vulnerable must be central to any truly righteous society. The orphan represents those who lack family protection, while the needy represents those who lack material resources. Both groups require active assistance from those who possess what they lack. The neighbor relationships Waljari dl Korba Waljari il Junbiba mine, the near neighbor, and the neighbor farther away, near, create an expanding circle of community responsibility. The near neighbor might refer to immediate physical proximity or to neighbors who share family or tribal connections. The neighbor farther away includes those who live nearby but share no family or cultural ties. Both deserve care and consideration, regardless of their relationship to us. This teaching about neighbors is particularly profound because neighbors are the people we encounter most regularly in daily life. yet they are not bound to us by family ties or formal contracts. The quality of neighbor relationships often determines the overall character of a community. When people care for their neighbors, neighborhoods become safe, supportive environments where children can grow and elderly people can age with dignity. The phrase wala sahib bil janbis, and the companion at your side, refers to temporary traveling companions, business associates, or anyone who finds themselves in our company for any period of time. This might include fellow passengers on a journey, colleagues at work, or even strangers who happen to sit beside us. The verse teaches that even brief human contact creates obligations of kindness and consideration. The inclusion of wabun as sabili mine and the traveler mine recognizes the particular vulnerability of people who are away from their home communities. Travelers lack their usual support networks and may face unexpected difficulties far from family and friends. Providing assistance to travelers becomes a sacred duty that helps maintain connection and trust between different communities. The reference to wabun ma malakat aymanukum, and those whom your right hands possess, idus the treatment of slaves and servants, demanding that even those in the most vulnerable social positions receive kind and just treatment. This verse contributed to the gradual transformation of slavery by insisting that slaves retain their fundamental human dignity and deserve compassionate care.
The verse concludes with a warning. Inna Allahala yuhibu man kana muktalan fashiran. Indeed, Allah does not like those who are self-deluding and boastful. The word muktal suggests someone who is arrogant and self-conceited, while fashu refers to someone who boasts about their accomplishments or status. These attitudes poison community relationships by creating false hierarchies and preventing genuine care for others. This warning connects directly to the social teachings that precede it. When people become proud and boastful, they stop seeing others as worthy of care and begin viewing them as inferior beings who exist to serve their needs. Ya ayyuha alladina amanu la takrabu as salata wa antum sukara hatta talamu ma takluna wala junuban ila abari sabili ihata taka silu wa in kuntum mada awala safa faren awaja ahadukum min al-gaiti ihalamastum an-nisa falam tajidu ma'an fataya mamu saidan tayyiban famsahu bi wujuhikum wa itikum inna Allaha kana afuwan gafuran. O you who believe, do not approach prayer while you are intoxicated until you know what you are saying, nor in a state of janaba, except when traveling through a place of prayer, until you have washed your whole body. And if you are ill or on a journey, or one of you comes from the place of relieving himself, or you have contacted women and find no water, then seek clean earth and wipe over your faces and your hands. Indeed, Allah is ever pardoning and forgiving. Tas. This verse introduces the essential spiritual practices that form the inner foundation of the just society described throughout Surah An-Nisa. After establishing social laws and family relationships, the Qur'an reminds us that external righteousness must be supported by internal spiritual discipline. Prayer serves as both the source of strength for righteous action and the means of maintaining connection with divine guidance. The address Ya ayyuha alladina amanu, you who believe, signals that what follows applies specifically to those who have committed themselves to following divine guidance. These are not universal human practices, but specific disciplines for those who seek to live as conscious servants of Allah. The spiritual requirements for believers naturally exceed those for humanity in general, reflecting the higher calling that comes with conscious faith. The prohibition La takrabu az salata wa antum sukara, do not approach prayer while you are intoxicated, establishes that spiritual practice requires full mental clarity and conscious intention. The word sukara refers to any state of intoxication, whether from alcohol, drugs,
or even extreme emotional disturbance that clouds judgment and awareness. Prayer demands presence of mind and heart that intoxication makes impossible. The condition hatta talamu ma takluna, until you know what you are saying, reveals the fundamental nature of Islamic prayer as conscious communication with Allah. This is not merely ritual recitation or emotional expression, but deliberate, meaningful conversation with the divine. Every word must be spoken with awareness and intention. Mindless repetition defeats the purpose of this sacred communication. This teaching reflects deeper wisdom about the relationship between consciousness and spirituality. True spiritual practice requires us to be fully present, aware of our words and actions, conscious of our relationship with Allah. When the mind is clouded by intoxication, this consciousness becomes impossible, reducing prayer to empty gestures rather than genuine worship. The prohibition wala junuban, ila abari sabili, hihata taka silu, nor in a state of janaba, except when traveling through a place of prayer, until you have washed your whole body, addresses the requirement for ritual purity before prayer. The word janaba refers to a state of major ritual impurity that requires full body washing ghusl before prayer is permitted. This requirement for physical cleanliness before prayer serves multiple purposes. On a practical level, it promotes personal hygiene and health. On a spiritual level, it creates a transition between ordinary activities and sacred communion with Allah. The act of washing becomes a symbolic cleansing that prepares both body and soul for prayer. The exception ila abari sabili, except when traveling through a place of prayer, acknowledges that life's practical realities sometimes conflict with ideal spiritual requirements. A traveler who is in a state of janaba, but must pass through a mosque or prayer area, is not required to avoid the space entirely, but should not stop to pray until proper cleansing is possible. The verse then addresses alternative purification when water is unavailable. Wa in kuntum mada awala safarin oja ahadukam minali ga iti olamastum in nisa falam tajidu man fataya ma musaidan tayaban. This comprehensive list covers illness that makes washing harmful, travel where water is scarce, natural bodily functions, and intimate relations, all situations that might create ritual impurity or require purification. The solution fataya ma musaidan tayaban famsahu biwusu hikam wa itikam. Then seek clean earth and wipe over your faces and your hands, introduces the concept of tayammum or dry ablution using clean or sand. This practice demonstrates Islam's practical wisdom, recognizing that spiritual obligations must be adaptable to human circumstances while maintaining their essential spiritual purpose. The use of earth for purification when water is unavailable carries beautiful symbolism. Earth represents humility and return to our origin, reminding us that we are created from dust and will return to dust. When we use earth for purification, we symbolically acknowledge our humble nature while still fulfilling our spiritual obligations. The verse concludes with Inna Allah hakana ol for one gafur on minus indeed, Allah is ever pardoning and forgiving. These divine attributes provide reassurance that when sincere believers face genuine difficulties in fulfilling spiritual requirements, divine mercy accommodates their circumstances. Allah's forgiveness does not excuse carelessness or deliberate neglect, but it does cover the inevitable human limitations and unexpected difficulties that arise in spiritual practice. This combination of precise spiritual requirements with merciful accommodation reflects the perfect balance of Islamic spirituality. The religion demands serious commitment and careful attention to spiritual disciplines, but it also recognizes human frailty and provides alternatives when perfect compliance becomes impossible. Ya yuwa oladina, amanu kunu kwawamana, bil kisti, shuhada, lillahi, wala'ala, anfusikum, O Allah dani, wala krabina, in yakun ganiyin, o fakiran, fallahu ala bihima, fala tatabiyu ala hawa, antadiluwa, intaluwa turidu, faina. Stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves, your parents and your relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not the lusts of your hearts, lest you may avoid justice, and if you distort your witness or refuse to give it, verily, Allah is ever well acquainted with what you do. This verse presents what may be considered the ultimate test of human character and spiritual development. After guiding believers through family relationships, social responsibilities, and spiritual practices, the Qur'an now demands the highest possible standard of moral courage, choosing justice even when it costs us personally, even when it goes against our deepest loyalties, even when it requires us to act against our immediate self-interest. The opening command, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qisti, all you who believe, stand out firmly for justice, uses the intensive form qawwamina, which suggests not merely supporting justice when convenient, but becoming people whose very essence is defined by their commitment to fairness and truth. This is not a passive stance but an active, ongoing commitment that shapes every decision and action. The word qist refers to justice in its purest form, not mere legal compliance or social conformity, but the deep righteousness that ensures every person receives what they truly deserve. This justice transcends human legal systems and social arrangements, reaching toward the divine standard of perfect fairness that takes into account every relevant factor and considers the ultimate welfare of all involved. The phrase shuhada, lillahi, as witnesses to Allah, transforms the concept of testimony from a legal procedure into a sacred act of worship. When we bear witness to truth, we are not merely providing information to human courts, but standing before Allah as representatives of divine justice on earth. This sacred dimension of testimony makes lying under oath not just perjury, but a form of blasphemy that corrupts our relationship with ultimate truth. The truly revolutionary aspect comes with wala, ola anfusikum, or Allah deni, wala krabina, even if it be against yourselves, your parents and your relatives. This command shatters every form of tribal loyalty, family favoritism, and personal self-protection that typically corrupts human justice systems. The verse demands that we testify truthfully even when that truth will harm us personally, damage our families, or destroy our closest relationships. Consider the profound psychological and social courage this requires. Testifying against yourself means admitting your own wrongdoing even when you might escape punishment through silence. Testifying against your parents means choosing abstract justice over the concrete people who gave you life and raised you with love. Testifying against relatives means potentially destroying family relationships that provide security and belonging throughout life. The verse acknowledges the powerful temptations that make such justice difficult in yakun ganiyin or fakiran. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. Wealth and poverty both create pressures that can corrupt justice. We might favor the rich because we hope for their patronage, or favor the poor because we sympathize with their suffering. The Qur'an insists that neither wealth nor poverty should influence our commitment to truth. The phrase Fallahu ala bihima, Allah is more worthy of both, reminds us that our ultimate loyalty must be to divine justice rather than human circumstances. The rich person's wealth and the poor person's need are both temporary conditions that should not override our commitment to truth. Only Allah deserves our absolute loyalty, and that loyalty expresses itself through unwavering commitment to justice. The warning Fala tatabu al-hawa and tadilu. So follow not the lusts of your hearts lest you may avoid justice. identifies the root cause of injustice, allowing our personal desires to override our moral commitments. The word hawa encompasses all forms of selfish desire for comfort, security, approval, revenge, or personal advantage. These desires naturally pull us away from justice when justice threatens what we want. The concluding threat, Walen talwa turdi, Falen, Olaha, Kana, Beam, Tana, Mailuna, Kabiran, and if you distort your witness or refuse to give it, verily Allah is ever well acquainted with what you do, addresses the two primary ways people evade their responsibility for justice. Talwur refers to twisting or distorting testimony, while turdi means turning away or refusing to testify at all. Both forms of evasion represent failures of moral courage. When we distort truth, we actively corrupt justice. When we refuse to testify, we passively enable injustice through our silence. The verse insists that both active corruption and passive enablement are morally equivalent. Both represent choices to prioritize personal comfort over divine justice. The final phrase, Kabiran, well acquainted, carries both warning and comfort. It warns those who would evade justice that divine knowledge encompasses all their secret motivations and hidden actions. But it also comforts those who choose justice despite personal cost, assuring them that their sacrifices are seen and will be rewarded by the one who knows all things. In Allahala yakfiru and yushraka bihi wa yakfiru madun dalika liman yasha waman yushrik bilahai faka iftara ithman aziman. Indeed, Allah does not forgive association with him, but he forgives what is less than that for whom he wills. And whoever associates others with Allah has certainly fabricated a tremendous sin. This verse brings us to the heart of divine accountability, revealing the ultimate cosmic perspective that gives meaning to all the earthly struggles and moral choices described throughout Surah An-Nisa. Here we encounter the final reckoning that awaits every human soul, the divine justice that ultimately resolves all inequities and rewards all sincere efforts toward righteousness. The opening declaration, Inna Allaha la yaghfiru and yushraka bihi. Indeed, Allah does not forgive association with him, establishes the one absolute boundary in divine mercy. The word shirk refers to the fundamental error of treating anything created as worthy of the worship and ultimate loyalty that belongs only to the Creator. This is not merely a theological mistake, but a corruption of consciousness that makes authentic spiritual life impossible. The absoluteness of this prohibition reflects the foundational nature of pure monotheism in establishing human dignity and social justice. When people worship money, power, nationality, or any finite thing as their ultimate value, they inevitably create hierarchies that justify oppression and exploitation. Only pure monotheism, the recognition that Allah alone deserves ultimate loyalty, can sustain the commitment to universal human dignity and justice that Surah An-Nisa has been developing. Consider how shirk manifests in contemporary life. When wealth becomes someone's ultimate concern, they may exploit workers or deceive customers to increase profits. When national identity becomes someone's ultimate loyalty, they may support wars or discrimination against other peoples. When family honor becomes someone's ultimate value, they may cover up crimes or abuse to protect reputation. In each case, making something finite into an ultimate value corrupts moral judgment and enables injustice. The contrasting promise, wa yaghfiru ma duna dalika lama yashau, but he forgives what is less than that for whom he wills, reveals the infinite scope of divine mercy for all other forms of human failure. Every sin except shirk falls within the realm of potential forgiveness, demonstrating that divine mercy encompasses virtually all human weakness and wrongdoing. This vast scope of forgiveness provides profound comfort for sincere believers who struggle with moral failure. The person who lies, steals, commits adultery, fails to care for orphans, or neglects prayer can find forgiveness through sincere repentance. The only unforgivable sin is the fundamental orientation that makes authentic repentance impossible, the worship of finite things that blinds people to their need for divine guidance. The phrase Lama Yashao, minus for whom he wills, might seem to suggest arbitrary divine decision-making, but deeper reflection reveals that divine will operates according to wisdom and justice that transcends human understanding. Divine forgiveness responds to genuine repentance, sincere regret, and authentic commitment to change. The willing of divine forgiveness aligns with the spiritual readiness of the individual to receive and benefit from that mercy. The warning Wama yushrak billahi fakad, iftara, ifman aziman. And whoever associates others with Allah has certainly fabricated a tremendous sin, uses the word iftara, which means to invent or fabricate lies. This choice of words reveals that shirk is not just wrong behavior, but a fundamental distortion of reality. When people treat created things as worthy of ultimate worship, they live in a kind of spiritual delusion that corrupts their entire relationship with existence. The word aziman, tremendous sin, indicates that this is not merely another sin among many in a category of wrongdoing so severe that it dwarfs all other moral failures. This is because shirk corrupts the very foundation of moral reasoning. Someone who worships wealth cannot truly understand justice. Someone who worships power cannot truly understand mercy. Someone who worships any finite thing cannot truly understand the infinite value of human beings created in divine image. This teaching about divine accountability provides essential context for all the social and family laws presented throughout Surah An-Nisa. Every command to protect orphans, every requirement for justice in marriage, every call to stand for truth even against personal interest gains ultimate significance from the knowledge that our choices matter in cosmic terms. We are not merely creating temporary social arrangements but participating in a divine drama where justice and mercy ultimately prevail. The verse also provides comfort for those who suffer injustice in this life. The orphan whose inheritance is stolen, the woman whose rights are violated, the truthful witness who pays a price for honesty, all can take comfort in knowing that divine justice sees everything, and will ultimately set all accounts right. Human justice systems are fallible and incomplete, but divine accountability is perfect and comprehensive. For those who perpetrate injustice, the verse serves as both warning and invitation. The warning is clear: no wrongdoing escapes divine notice, and ultimate accountability awaits everyone. But the invitation is equally clear: except for the fundamental error of shirk, every sin can find forgiveness through sincere repentance and authentic spiritual transformation. This balance of warning and mercy reflects the divine nature itself: perfect justice that demands accountability, perfect mercy that offers forgiveness to all who sincerely seek it. Yastaftunaka quli Allahu yuftikum fil kalalati, in Imran, halaka laysa lahu waladun wallahu yuktun falaha nisfu. Ma taraka wahu wa hurithu, ha in lam yakun laha waladun fa in kanata, ithnatani falahuma, athuluthani, mima, taraka wa hirialan wa nisa. Unfalil Dakari, Mithlu Hazil Lanthayani, Ubayinu, Allahu Lakum, Untadi Luwa, Allahu Bikuli Shayan Alim. They request from you a legal ruling. Say, Allah gives you a ruling concerning one who leaves neither descendants nor ascendants as heirs. If a man dies, having no child but having a sister, she will have half of what he left. And he inherits from her if she dies and has no child. But if there are two sisters, they will have 2/3 of what he left. If there are both brothers and sisters, the male will have twice the share of the female. Allah makes clear to you His law. lest you go astray. And Allah is knowing of all things. This final passage brings Surah An-Nisa to its conclusion with a return to the practical wisdom of inheritance law, but now viewed through the lens of all the spiritual and moral development that has preceded it. What might appear to be merely technical legal details actually represents the culmination of the surah's entire message about justice, family relationships, and divine guidance for human society. The opening phrase, Yastaftunaka, they request from you a legal ruling, reveals an important principle about how divine guidance reaches human communities. This verse was revealed in response to specific questions from the early Muslim community about inheritance situations not covered in earlier revelations. This shows us that divine guidance is not abstract philosophy but practical wisdom that addresses real human needs and concerns. The directive, Quli Allahu yuftikum fil kalalati, means say Allah gives you a ruling concerning kalalahi, emphasizes that the answer comes not from human opinion or cultural tradition but from divine knowledge. The word kalalahi refers to inheritance situations where the deceased leaves neither parents nor children, cases that fall outside the more straightforward parent-child inheritance patterns addressed earlier in the surah. These kalalahi cases are often the most complex inheritance situations involving siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and other extended family members. By addressing these complicated scenarios, the Qur'an demonstrates that divine guidance extends to every aspect of human life, no matter how intricate or unusual the circumstances might be. The specific case in Imru'an halaka laysa lahu waladun, walahu yuktun falaha nisfu mataraka. If a man dies, having no child but having a sister, she will have half of what he left, establishes the sister's inheritance right in clear, unambiguous terms. This simple statement carries profound implications for women's status in society, ensuring that unmarried women have economic security and independence even when they have no male protectors. The reciprocal provision, wahi rithua, in lam yakun laha waladun, and he inherits from her if she dies and has no child, demonstrates the equality of inheritance rights between brothers and sisters in these circumstances. When a woman dies without children, her brother inherits from her just as she would inherit from him. This reciprocity reflects the mutual responsibility and care that should characterize sibling relationships throughout life. The expansion to multiple sisters far in kanata ithnataini falahuma athuluthani mimataraka. But if there are two sisters, they will have 2/3 of what he left. Shows how the inheritance system adapts to different family configurations while maintaining its core principles of justice and family support. Two sisters collectively receive a larger share than one sister alone, reflecting their greater collective needs and their shared responsibility for family welfare. The comprehensive conclusion, Wahyun kanu ikalahu ilan wa nisan falil dakari mithlu hadzi iluntayenu. If there are both brothers and sisters, the male will have twice the share of the female. Myth returns to the fundamental 2:1 ratio that appears throughout Islamic inheritance law. By this point in the surah, we understand this ratio not as gender discrimination, but as part of a comprehensive system that balances inheritance rights with ongoing financial responsibilities. The divine explanation, Yubayinu Allahu lakum antadilu, Allah makes clear to you His law lest you go astray, emphasizes the protective purpose of detailed legal guidance. Without clear divine direction, human beings naturally fall into patterns of favoritism, exploitation, and injustice. The specificity of inheritance law prevents families from being torn apart by disputes and ensures that wealth serves its proper purpose of supporting family welfare across generations. The phrase "antadilu," lest you go astray, suggests that inheritance disputes have the potential to lead families away from righteousness and into destructive patterns of greed, resentment, and family breakdown. By providing clear, divinely mandated rules, the Qur'an removes these disputes from the realm of human preference and emotion, placing them instead under divine protection. The surah's final words, Wallahu bikali shay'in, and Allah is knowing of all things, provide the ultimate foundation for accepting and implementing this guidance. Every detailed inheritance rule, every specific percentage, every particular family situation has been anticipated by divine knowledge that encompasses all possible circumstances and their consequences. This concluding emphasis on divine knowledge brings us full circle to the surah's opening themes about human unity and divine guidance. We began with the recognition that all humanity springs from one soul, and we end with the assurance that divine knowledge encompasses every detail of human need and circumstance. The comprehensive nature of this guidance reflects the comprehensive love and care that the Creator has for creation. Thank you for resting with me and listening to these reminders from the Recitation. If you like to continue this journey of peace and reflection, please subscribe for future episodes. Together we can keep learning and finding calm through the words of Allah.